Welcome back. It's episode number 10 with the Caldwell brothers. So for this one, I'm not going to lie. For the Tropic Lightning, I was going to open it last time and yell big ass titties. I'm not sure what you yell whenever you open a different energy drink. So y'all let us know. But for the Tropical Lightning, we had someone ask like why it was big ass titties when you open the Tropical Lightning.
Yeah, we have no idea why you're supposed to say big ass titties.
I don't know.
It's just a thing at first form. That's what you're supposed to do.
I don't know. Who knows? Kind of cool though.
C4 doesn't have their own thing. I don't.
Yeah,
think.
I don't know.
You just
maybe just yell out the name.
Yeah,
Midnight Cherry.
it's way less cool.
Who knows? Yeah. So we're back with episode 10. We're gonna have a different format from here on out with our podcast. And you'll know which episode is which depending on the title of the podcast. So we're going to have 3 different formats for our podcast. The first being M&M, which basically just means miles and memories. It's where we go through and it's just off the cuff. We're telling stories and we're just talking about maybe an event, whether it's High Rocks, 100-mile race, whatever it may be. But just gonna be storytelling. And then we have Uncut, which is this episode today, but it is 3 topics in the business and endurance world that's controversial, and we're gonna be talking about basically, I don't know what like we think of that topic specifically.
Yeah. So it can either be 3 topics from like for instance, we posted a picture on our story and asked for questions. So it can be 3 questions from an Instagram story post, or it can just be 3 topics in the space that we come up with ourselves and maybe find some research around, or just we have some outside input of someone else maybe on the podcast that wants to give their input. But really the Uncut is always going to be 3 different topics.
Yep.
That we'll go through, whether that comes from our Instagram stories or if it just comes from topics we generate ourselves.
And then the last and final one is going to be called Grounded. It's just lessons learned. So in the moment, say we go through our week and it's before the podcast comes up on Sunday and we've dealt with something in the business or endurance world that we just want to talk about on the podcast and just kind of get out our ideas or like where we're at with it. Maybe what we learned from whatever happened that week. We're going to talk about it. So
Yeah. This will be it'll be easier for you guys to listen, because I know for me, especially when I listen to podcasts, sometimes there's certain segments that people do that I'm not really as interested in, and this will give us an opportunity to kind of divide up what we talk about. That way, whenever people go to an episode, they know what to expect. Mm-hmm. So if it's an Eminem episode, if it's Miles and Memories, it's going to be a lot of storytelling. That one's going to be probably much less scripted. It's going to be after, like Drew said, after an event or after something huge that we've went through, and we just kind of want to reminisce on it and tell stories and laugh and have a good time. That'll be Eminem. The Uncut, that one will tend to be a little bit more prepared ahead of time. That way we can give as much value as possible around the topics that we're talking about. And then Grounded obviously will just be around lessons learned, so a little bit more of a wisdom, I guess you could say, based podcast, even though we don't know much and we realize we don't know much, and we're just figuring this out as we go. It's just lessons that we've learned personally that we hold near and dear to us. So we like to talk about them, and hopefully somebody else can relate with them along the way. And that's the whole point of starting this podcast in the first place. So
yeah, absolutely. Shoot, let's dive in. So for the first topic, this is Uncut. So we're going to be going over 3 topics today that are somewhat controversial, where people have different opinions on these topics specifically. But the first being running too slow. So we talked about this already, but basically getting into running, and you always hear like run zone 2, like run slower, constantly, and that's like in your head, and you do run slower, but at what point should you pick up the intensity, and like where should that come from? So we do have a study too today, but do you want to talk a little bit about what you...
Yeah, dude, because I think that for me especially, because we get a decent amount of questions on people that want to get into running, or maybe they're just interested in switching up their training. Like your training of just lifting is getting boring and you want to get into running. And you hear a lot of advice, and specifically on social media. And I'm not against anyone posting anything on social media to help others get into running. I think that's great, especially if you've been in it for a decent amount of time and you're lending any form of advice that helped you to someone else who's wanting to start. The issue is that I think that you have so much advice that it can easily fuck somebody up who's getting into it or wanting to get better at running. I think advice is dependent on experience level and how long you've been doing something.
Yeah.
And then just God-given natural talent. And I think it can apply to people at different points in their journey. The same way with business, the same way with endurance. It's all three of those factors are going to play into the scenario. Mm-hmm. And I think a big reason this came up in the first place is because if you're into the running space or you're into endurance in general, you see a lot of posts, especially from, and we haven't been in this extremely long, so I don't want to sit here and make it seem like we're veterans in this space, because nowhere near that. But we've been in it for about a year and a half almost at this point, I guess, or a year and a quarter to a year and a half. And religiously, I mean, every day, there hasn't been a break since we got into it. So I think we're past the point of just being like an average person in the running space. But you see a lot of people whenever they get into it, once they kind of, what's the effect called? The Dunning-Kruger effect.
Oh, you talked about it.
I know I went through it. Whenever you first get into running, or really anything in general, and you go from being a complete beginner and you learn the basics of the trade, the skill, whatever it may be, you immediately have this kind of this ego to it of, I know everything and I've figured it all out. That's kind of how wisdom works, is you realize you learn a lot and then realize you don't know shit, and then you learn a lot and realize you don't know shit until eventually you realize that you're never going to know shit. And that's the point. But with running, you see people that get into it and then they immediately start posting about how everyone needs to run slower, run slow to go fast. And I do think that is great advice if someone is just starting out. Yeah. But the further that you get into running, I found, at least for me, running slow all of the time and never pushing the gas, especially if you have one speed workout a week, never pushing the gas. Yes, you open up the door to more injuries and things of that nature whenever you're running harder and faster, but that's where strength training comes into play. That's where your rehab exercises come into play. And I think if you just tell someone who's been in it for a good amount of time to just run slower, I think it's going to be dependent from person to person. And I think someone's zone 2 compared to the next guy is going to be different person to person. You can't just take 180 minus age and say, okay, that's where it's so much more intricate. And really, if you want to get the most accurate basis on it, dude, you should probably get a VO2 max test if you want to be. Oh yeah. If you're someone who wants to be completely
like
dialed,
the actual like heart rate zones checked to see like where you're actually at. I think it was surprising whenever you sent me that Instagram post from the dude that did get his VO2 max tested.
Yeah.
And his zone 2 heart rate was a lot higher than I had expected.
Yeah, this was Billy's current coach. So Matt Zalea, I think I'm saying Matt's last name right. But I really like the content Matt puts out, by the way. But he put out he did a VO2 max test, and dude, his VO2 max was ridiculous. It was like crazy. Yeah, it was like in the 70s or something crazy. But I thought what was really interesting about it was his zone 2 range. And
very high.
This is what really sparked me like going down a rabbit hole and researching and trying to understand why his range was so wide. Dude, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I want to say
it was like 140 to like 158 or something like that.
Maybe 144 to
something like that. Yeah.
It was somewhere like 140 something to around the 160, and I'm like, wow, that is such a wide range. Yeah. And also, that's really high to be in what I would have thought to be in zone 2. But also, it's going to go into like like I said again, his experience level, how long he's been doing it, and genetics will probably play quite a bit of role in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where kind of like the topic gets brought up, and it does get really interesting. I'm not saying I have the answers, but what I will say is I think it's different person to person, and we're going to bring up the study that we have and that we're kind of going off of here. And obviously I understand that you can't just take one study and apply it to everything, but I do think that this study is extremely interesting and sparks some thought around the topic. But I think from person to person, it's going to be completely different. I think zone 2, a lot of times, I think that's why some of the buddies I have that just go off feel, they don't even look at heart rate anymore. They've been doing it a really long time and can do that.
Yeah.
And their zone 2 is going to be more of a wider range, that type of thing. So that's why I think advice is specific on the person that you're giving it to. So, and I'm also not opposed to giving advice on social media either, to be a little bit more broad, because I understand that those types of things generate, like, I guess if you wanted to say more attention, videos like that. But what sucks is the person receiving it at the end of it, they're going to be at different stages in their training. So it doesn't really just necessarily apply across
everybody. Yeah.
Across everyone. Yeah. Do you want to give kind of like the basis?
Yeah. And that's hard too. Like giving advice to like certain things. So there's not like a one size fit all for anything like you're saying. So it makes it a lot harder.
Exactly.
But yeah, so this study, it says, and this is just like bits and pieces from the study too. But the first part says high intensity, so HIIT training and sprinting SIT training can be 2 to 4 times more efficient at boosting mitochondria than zone 2 training. And well-trained athletes actually noticed, this is well-trained athletes too. This is not like beginner athletes. Mm-hmm. Well-trained athletes have actually noticed diminishing returns from low-intensity training. Zone 2 should be recovering between hard sessions, is what the study said. And the study also mentioned too, like 1 to 2 like speed workouts or like high intensity workouts a week, and the rest being zone 2. So the zone 2 being the recovery in between. So whenever I say that, I'm not also saying that it should be high intensity every day either. But I think that's very interesting to see.
Yeah, so the study, I'm going to give my take on it. The study is Molmen et al., so Molmen, 2024. And to give you just kind of an overview of what they did, they went through different types of exercise and looked at how it affected mitochondrial density and then capillary density as well. And capillaries are what are going to feed the muscles for with like the oxygen, the nutrients, the blood flow that you need to perform. And then mitochondria, everyone's heard of it since day one, the powerhouse of the cell. More mitochondria you have, or the dense, the more area they cover, the more efficient you're going to be at exercising. So it looked at these two things, and essentially what it came up with was that more zone 2 training, or they classified it in here as just endurance training, ET. It's just continuous moderate intensity activities like jogging or cycling. That's going to be more beneficial for someone in the beginning stages who's just kind of started out, because you're building that aerobic base. Your body isn't used to it. It's a lot harder for you to stay in zone 2. Mm-hmm. So that type of training will be super beneficial. So I think this is, when you think about it here, someone that is just starting out, telling them to run slower a lot, that it does kind of apply. It makes sense. But whenever someone becomes a little bit more advanced, or has been doing it longer and it makes more sense and they've developed their aerobic base, mm-hmm. this is when, like how they classify it in the study, is high intensity training, HIT, or sprint interval training, SIT. Mm-hmm. These two are going to come into play a lot more.
I wish we could show this graph too, because that graph's on there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very interesting. If you want to see kind of the graph that I'm talking about, you can go and see it on Instagram. So it's Dr. Phil Batterson. So Dr. PhilBatterson. Mm-hmm. And he gives a really good breakdown on the study that I thought was really interesting. But essentially what this brings to light is that the more trained that you become, the more beneficial high intensity interval training and sprint interval training become on your body. And I think this is going to play into just kind of how efficient your muscles become the more that you train them. Movement patterns, your body's ability to adapt and recover is all going to play into this. But it's really interesting to think that once you get to a certain point, zone 2 is just there more for
recovery
and kind of maintenance in a way. Like you're doing zone 2 at a certain point to just make sure that your base is still there, but you're only really getting better
whenever you do speed work.
Yeah, and whenever you're getting faster. And this is why you'll hear me a lot of times say, I only get one speed workout a week or one, let's say, high rocks conditioning session a week that's I'm going to be touching zone 5. You're going, like, I'm hard. I'm getting after it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it's become so commonplace to tell people to run. This is where the controversy comes in. I think it's become so commonplace to tell people to go slow and to run slow that I think that has kind of been lost a little bit. I think that should be shown more on social media I shouldn't say going hard because people, I know why they do it, because there are people who should be running slow that are running their zone 2 paces at like a 170.
Yeah.
I get that. But what I'm saying is like intentional hard work. And this is something I'm learning right now and talking to people in the space that are better than me and asking questions of how to go harder, more intentionally. And for me, that's like taking the 60-second rest between really hard interval training. That way you can let the lactate buffer and your body gets more efficient at buffering it. And that's kind of like the theme here. It's like going hard, knowing when to rest, and zone 2 kind of becomes this like in between style training. I think it's different though for someone like you who's training for an ultra.
Well, I was going to say I have personal experience with this, like with zone 2 running and like not doing speed work and not becoming faster. Like I have personal experience with that. Whenever we first started running and we ran zone 2 all the time, like yes, I got faster. But whenever it got to the point where I started training for my first 100-mile race, I remember talking about this on a different podcast that I ran zone 2 every single workout, the whole training block, and I never got faster. So that kind of relates with the study too, and shows like I ran zone 2 for 3.5 months training for a 100-mile race. I was putting in a lot of volume. I was putting in 55, 60 miles a week running a zone 2. If running slower at that point was better, you think I'd have gotten faster. And then I told you about the second prep where I actually started incorporating hill work and speed work into my running, which, I mean, you're going to have to do speed work to get faster anyway. But I did get a lot faster in my second prep whenever I started incorporating speed work and hill work. And like I actually like was intentional about my speed work.
And this is,
I got my heart rate up.
And this is just from personal experience. This is more, I would say, bro science, but I think bro science is awesome for that reason.
Oh, yeah.
I think you feel it, you notice it. And if you can become more efficient at a faster pace, think how running the 10-minute pace is going to feel whenever you do go to run 100 miles. It's going to feel easier.
Way easier.
The reason I mentioned the post is so people can see the graphs that he puts on here, but he puts on like a percentage of mitochondria that are pulled in a certain area with increasing your training frequency, like how many sessions you're doing a week over time, how that looks, and then also the mitochondria pulled in a well-trained person versus like an averagely trained person.
That one was cool. I liked that one.
Yeah, with regard to like high-intensity training and the sprint interval training and how it affects the mitochondrial density. And I think it's super interesting. The more, all I'm going to say is the more that someone was trained and the more HIIT and sprint interval training that they were doing, it did lead to more mitochondrial density, which is really cool. And he basically just says to change your thinking around training and to maximize mitochondrial growth, incorporate 1 to 2 HIIT or sprint interval training sessions per week and fill the rest of your training with easier zone 2 training. If you're limited, zone 2 should be used to recover between hard sessions, not your primary stimulus for growth. So long story short, if you're just starting, I think zone 2 all the time. I think once you build the base though, and you can stay in zone 2 for let's say 30 minutes plus, without getting out of zone 2, you should probably start mixing in some interval work slowly, like once a week, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. But the better you get, I do think the harder and more intentional your speed work should be.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do sometimes like relating it with things that I've done in the past too. And I think we both have experience with lifting. And it kind of goes back to whenever you first started lifting, you were more focused on form. Ego got in the way for sure whenever I first started lifting, and I wanted to lift heavy all the time. But if my goal was to go get stronger in the gym, and I went in and I started lifting heavy right off the bat without good form, like I'm going to mess myself up. I'm probably going to get hurt.
No doubt.
But if I go in and I work on form, which we did in like lifting class. What?
Keep going.
Okay. Yeah, we started going over form in lifting class and everything like that. And you got better at your form first. Whenever that was like locked down, then you moved on to lifting heavier. And I started lifting heavier more often than I did whenever I first started. So just relating it with something that, yeah,
spot on.
I think it makes sense. It relates with a lot of things in life. But moving to the second topic.
Yeah.
You ready for it? Or you got anything on the first one still?
I'm good to go.
Okay, yeah. So the second topic is the work-life balance, the idea of having balance between your personal life and work. So some people, you could see it online. I've talked to people in person about it. Some people think that the work-life balance should be like perfectly balanced. I know some people that think you should have a perfect balance between work, relationships, fitness, everything should be perfectly balanced. Then there's other people that have podcasts. I don't want to say names, but there's people that think if you want to be successful, then it's going to require you to have an unbalanced lifestyle. Like you're going to have to work all the time. You're going to have to only work, like only focus on this. Like you can't really have a balance outside of that. And I kind of just wanted to get your idea on this work-life balance.
Yeah.
What you thought, because we've talked about it before.
This is going to be all opinion based, okay?
Yeah.
I think it depends on how you look at the word unbalanced. I think if you hear unbalanced and you think negative, like if you think that's a bad thing when it comes to someone's life, then yeah, maybe that is an issue for you. But I hear unbalanced and I think requirement. I think I know no other way, because obviously I'm nowhere where I want to be yet, and I don't say that in a negative or depressing way. I say that in a that's exciting. I'm building toward the person that I want to be. But I think that if you look at unbalanced, also I think it depends on how you define balance.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's going to be a lot of nuance there.
Yeah.
For me, I would say it's more blend.
Yeah.
Like someone may look at it and say unbalanced because all I do to the public eye is work and work out, and talk about working and work out. But for me, I've tried the best that I can to blend everything in my life to where it all just kind of works together. And obviously I have no good formula for that. I'm probably fucking up 97 different things. In that process, I probably should spend more time on a lot of different things. But for me right now, I think that it happens to be, you have to know where you're going, and there's certain things that are required whenever you're going. And for me right now, that's like my relationship, it's work, and it's fitness.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
Everything outside of that does kind of have to take a back seat. Like if you were able to just everything to be top priority, that doesn't
wouldn't even make sense.
It doesn't even make sense. No, like you only have so much bandwidth and so much focus as a human being. And if everything is top priority, you're probably going to find this is where you're probably going to find yourself in a anxious, depressed, all the above.
Because you don't have time for anything. Then you're so focused on like trying to balance everything, you don't really give anything your effort.
Yeah. And I think we talk all the time about knowing why we want to do it. And I just was talking to Briley about it today. of knowing my why. And it's we were talking about when we have kids eventually, and we were talking about I was telling Bradley, I was like, Bradley, they're going to be professional athletes. And yeah, I do say that with a lot of ego. The reason is like Bradley's taller than me. Number one, I'll take a little hit.
There you go. Yo, you have never mentioned that before. Let's go.
Yeah, I'll take a little hit there.
Drop it in there.
But I mean, she was a Division I volleyball player, and then I wasn't, anything like super crazy, but
You're pretty good at baseball.
I was good at sports. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we started talking about that, and then we went down the rabbit hole of whenever they get into sports and they want to do travel ball or whatever it may be. I want to have the means by supporting whatever they're into, and even if it's not sports, if it's music and they need a certain instrument that's going to allow them to play X, Y, Z. Obviously, I don't know shit about music, but that's the point for me. And I think right now it's about building something that you can provide to your kids down the road. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. And I think that requires certain sacrifices. And if I could do everything, yeah, that'd be great. But I know that I can't. And I know that what we're doing right now requires a lot of focus. Building stores and gaining more skills when people and things rely on you. You have to be focused.
Yeah.
If you're not, dude, and I've felt it, the world will pick you up and drag you, bro. It really fucking will. And I think that this may sound harsh, dude, I know, but sometimes if I have the choice between going to X social event or sitting at home by myself, I'm going to sit at home by myself because for me, I know that my mind is the most important asset. And if it's not in the right place, then everything else suffers because of it. So,
yeah, that's good.
And that also might hold me back in some ways, but that's just that's the phase I'm in life. And I know one day I may look back at this and laugh, but what's your take?
Yeah, no, I believe the same thing. Like I have certain priorities and certain things that I know have to get done every single day, and if it has to get done, it's going to get done. For me, that's if I have to work the store from 9 to 8 4 or 5 days in a row, I'm going to work the store 4 or 5 days in a row, open and close. And if it's not that, then it's training, and if it's not that, it's my relationship. You know what I mean? So I'm going to make time for everything. Like this next weekend, Taylor coming in town, like I'm going to make time for that. I'm going to get my training done at a different time. Just making certain things a priority. I think whatever's a priority in that moment is what is going to have to get done, and that's kind of how I look at it. So,
yeah, I don't think I've honestly, dude, I've never thought about that ever in my entire life. I've never been to sit there and I do think I analyze the actions that I take every day. I think that's important. But to sit there and wonder whether or not you're balancing things correctly is it's a strange way to look at it to me. I think that whatever you care about will become evident. And
exactly,
if you don't have as much time for some things, I also don't think that means you don't care about it. It just means that right now there are certain sacrifices that you have to make for things that are going to matter in the future.
Yeah.
And right now I'm 25 and you're 20, and I think that right now is the time for sacrifice. And I'm not I haven't regretted any of it. I've missed out on a lot too. I've never, probably every party ever I've skipped, most trips skipped. I think the most trips I've ever taken is now because of the events that we're doing around fitness. It's been cool though, been able to see different parts of the world or the country, I should say. And yeah, I'm okay with it. I'll keep doing it too.
Agreed there. Yeah, most people would probably say that my life is unbalanced too, being 20 years old and not doing any of that either. But
no, I think you're building real skills though. I think
I am too. And I think it's worth it. I think everything is worth it.
I think right now it's hard because you know what you have to do, and you know that it's going to be hard to acquire the skills that you want to acquire. But I also don't think, like for you, we talked about it last pod, it's sales skills. And I think for you, if you didn't have people in your corner, like let's say me and Matt, or Matt specifically, because he's the one that brought it up to you. If you didn't have friends or people in your corner that were challenging the things that you were doing and making you realize like, hey, there are things that you have to get better at for us to grow this. If they weren't doing that, I think you'd be fucked.
Yeah, it's a bad place to be.
Very bad place to be. Now, there is a difference, I think, between like that type of friendship and maybe people that are listening or people just completely shitting on you for no reason. But I think when you analyze it, you're always going to realize that, like, even for him, he's doing that from a place of care, and because he knows that once you have that skill, no one can take it away from you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's real wealth. That has nothing to do with the financial number to it, but that's how you make something.
Yeah, no doubt. I think the quote from Andy Frisella is it that you work in your 20s and 30s
Mm-hmm.
and you're free in your 40s and 50s or something like that, or like, or you're free in your 20s and 30s and you work in your 40s and 50s.
Yeah,
I like that quote too.
Yeah, Matt said it the other day on the phone. He said when he's in his 50s, if he's working, he wants it to be because he chose to do so, not because he has to.
Yeah.
I know I'll be, but it'll be because I want to.
Yeah. Bro's always working.
For sure.
Yeah.
What's the last one?
So for the last one, and I thought about this one too. I remember a conversation that we had a while back, and it made me think of it. And it's the idea of having money for personal benefit and luxury, and like the shift in mindset from that to what you had talked about whenever we were on the phone. I don't know if you remember it, but I think whenever you're younger, or maybe some people still think this way, having money is cool because I can buy this or buy that or do this for myself or all that kind of thing. I think you get to a certain point where you shift your mindset and it actually becomes a lot better. But can you kind of give, like, do you remember what we talked about whenever we talked about it?
Yeah, if you boiled it down, what's the main question?
Like the idea of having money. Like, people think it's so cool for the wrong reasons, I think.
Oh, you're saying just like your perspective of having money as you get older?
Yeah.
I think, I don't even know if I hold much merit in this conversation because I don't think that I'm like at a place financially where it's like you could even give a ton of perspective on it. But
yeah,
I guess I can give my perspective on how my view around.
And I think other people had given like their views too, and I kind of think that we both aligned with that.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to the same topic earlier for me. I think
I see you had mentioned it.
I look at it more as an opportunity for other people to win, or to provide other opportunities for people whenever you have money. So that's why I chase it, I would say. I don't chase it because I want to go buy a $100,000 car, but I chase it because I know that once I do have it, the opportunities you can provide the people closest to you, like your family, or even more, maybe even more importantly, the people that are working in your company, I think the better. I think that's why. But I don't think I hold a ton of merit around the conversation yet because I haven't completely made it there. But that's how I view it.
Yeah. I just think when other people like bring it up, or people that are successful and they have their opinions on it, they do, like they had at some point made that transition between like, oh, like this stuff is cool, like to buy, and like it switched to like I can provide for like this many people. You hear it from like Andy Frisella, like he feels like he has like however many employees they have, like 800 people on his back. Like he's providing for all these people and all their families. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's a hard place to be, but it's also like a cool place to be and know that like you can provide other people with a life.
Mm-hmm. I do think as well, if we want to talk about material possessions at this point, in my mind, how I view it right now is I do think it's important to have goals or let's say a vision of something that you want to own.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have in my brain an idea of what I want the house I eventually build to
Same.
look like.
Yeah.
I think that's important. I
Mm-hmm.
think I think that drives me. And I would argue that if you don't have at least something like that, you probably wouldn't be as hungry to grow.
Yeah.
And maybe that sounds,
And I think the other way around though too. Like I think if it's all selfish, like you don't end up
of course.
like getting to where you could have been.
Yeah, I think there's a healthy balance. But also, once again, I think this is one of those topics I don't have enough.
Yeah, it's fair.
I don't have enough experience with yet to just give my entire input. But I think if we're talking about perspective on it, that's how I view it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sweet. That's what I'm thinking too.
That's all three.
Yeah, that's all three.
Yeah, that's it, guys.
That's a podcast of Uncut.
Yeah, that's episode 10. That's the first uncut, I would say, segment that we've done. But the next episode will be around the questions that you guys asked on the Instagram story, and we'll pick 3 of the questions and go through those, and those will be a lot less scripted. But that will be essentially another uncut episode.
Mm-hmm.
But just to show you kind of the differences between the 2 episodes, how uncut can be questions asked from the story, or it can just be topics that we make
Decided
up
on
and
beforehand. Mm-hmm.
Bring to the show that we think would be valuable. But the next one will be more of a Q&A style. So maybe we can even give a chance before the next one to ask a few more questions like ahead of time so people have time to answer. But that is a wrap on this episode of Uncut for episode number 10 total.